On the morning of Sunday, the 27th of October, 1878, the most respectable savings bank in New York City sat quiet on the corner of Broadway and Bleecker Street. By the time its clerks returned the next day, almost $3 million had walked out the front door. No window was smashed. No alarm was tripped. The vault had been opened the way a depositor opens a drawer, with patience and the right combination. It would be remembered as the largest robbery in American history to that point. And the man who designed it down to the inch was already dead. To understand the robbery, you first have to understand the man who imagined it. George Leonidas Leslie was born in 1842 in Cincinnati, the son of a prosperous brewer. He studied architecture at the University of Cincinnati and graduated with honors. He should have spent his life designing buildings. Instead, after his father paid to keep him out of the Civil War draft, the social disgrace followed him until he closed his firm and moved to New York in 1869. There he reinvented himself as a cultured socialite, an art lover welcomed in fine company. Almost no one knew his real trade. His real trade was robbing banks, and he was extraordinarily good at it. Police and reporters came to call him the king of bank robbers. Some accounts credited his hand in a remarkable share of the major bank jobs in the country across the 1870s. He did not rely on brute force or luck. He relied on the same discipline he had learned as an architect. He obtained building plans. He studied vaults the way an engineer studies a bridge. Where most thieves saw a locked door, Leslie saw a problem with a solution, and he was willing to spend months, even years, to find it. Leslie did not work alone. His path into the underworld ran through Frederica Mandelbaum, the celebrated New York fence known across the city simply as Marm. From her shop, she moved stolen goods on an industrial scale and bankrolled ambitious crews. She is widely credited with helping organize Leslie's early major scores. Around them gathered some of the most capable professional criminals of the era, men like Jimmy Hope, and the wider circle of safe men and burglars who would later be named in the case. This was not a street gang. It was, in effect, a firm. The Manhattan Savings Institution was the hardest target in the city, which is exactly why Leslie wanted it. The plan, according to the accounts that survive, took shape roughly 3 years before the robbery. He began as a customer, opening the door to study the place legitimately. He drew detailed plans of the interior and exterior. Then he had a full replica of the relevant rooms built inside one of Mandelbaum's warehouses in Brooklyn, where the crew could rehearse the job again and again until every motion was second nature. It was less a heist than a production, staged in private until it was perfect. The vault was the heart of the problem, and here Leslie's patience showed. Rather than blast or drill the safe, the plan turned on learning its combination. Accounts described the use of a device nicknamed the Little Joker, a thin tool fitted inside the lock to record the numbers the dial was set to as the mechanism turned. Over repeated visits, the secret combination could be read off and copied. A weakness in the people around the vault did the rest. The genius of the scheme was that, done correctly, the bank would open itself. Every long con needs a man on the inside, and the Manhattan job had one. Patrick Shevlin worked at the bank as a night watchman, the person trusted to guard the building when it was empty. Won over by the crew, Shevlin became the door that let the others in. The plan also reportedly leaned on access to the janitor, Louis Werkel, who lived in the building with his family and knew the combination. 2 ordinary working men, one persuaded and one to be coerced, were the seam through which a fortune would slip. Then the architect vanished from his own masterpiece. In the summer of 1878, months before the robbery he had spent years designing, George Leonidas Leslie was found dead in wooded ground near Yonkers, north of the city. He had been shot, killed with a pearl-handled pistol that was reportedly his own. Suspicion fell on members of his own circle. Some believed the gang feared he might talk to investigators. Others pointed to a more personal motive, an affair with the wife of one of his associates. No one was ever charged. The man who could open any vault could not protect himself. The plan outlived its author. In the small hours of that October Sunday, the crew moved into the building. The accounts differ on exactly how many masked men came through, but the method is clear. They reached the janitor, Louis Werkel, inside his apartment, restrained him and his family, and pressed him for what they needed to open the vault. The bank's own thick cement construction, meant to keep thieves out, now worked against it, muffling any sound inside while the men worked. For something close to 3 hours, they emptied the vault in near silence. When the count was done, the loss was staggering. The robbers had taken $2,747,700, a sum that runs into the tens of millions in today's money, and made this, at the time, the largest paying robbery on record. But there was a flaw hidden inside the triumph. The great bulk of the haul, more than $2.5 million of it, was in registered bonds and securities, paper tied to named owners and recorded numbers. It was a fortune that was almost impossible to spend. The cash actually carried off was a tiny fraction of the total. A robbery this large could not be ignored, and the response became one of the largest investigations the city had seen. The detective most associated with bringing the case home was Thomas Burns, the famously relentless New York policeman who built his reputation on cracking exactly these kinds of cases. The break came the way it so often does. The inside man cracked. Watchman Patrick Shevlin confessed, and his account began to unspool the whole network, naming the men who had planned and carried out the job. Through 1879, the arrests came one after another. Jimmy Hope, his son Johnny Hope, and other members of the crew were taken into custody and charged. Shevlin, the informer, was held up as the state's key witness and was ultimately granted immunity in exchange for the testimony that convicted the others. Convictions followed, with prison terms handed down to men the law could prove had been inside that vault. The professional firm that Leslie had assembled was, piece by piece, taken apart in a courtroom. In the end, the perfect robbery undid itself. Because so much of the haul was registered paper that could never be safely sold, much of the value was eventually recovered and returned to the bank. By most accounts, only a relatively small sum, around $15,000, was never found. George Leonidas Leslie had designed a flawless way into the strongest vault in New York, and his crew had executed it almost exactly as drawn. What none of them could solve was the simpler problem that follows every great theft. Getting in was the easy part. Keeping it was impossible.